Hello and welcome. Today I have a very special guest with me, Mr. Ejaz Haider. He is a former colleague and he has on many occasions guided us through very difficult topics and times. Thank you very much, Ejaz Saab, for being with us. Ejaz Saab has, a very keen eye on military matters. He writes on them, he analyzes the situation, and his recent articles are eye-opener for all of us. Today, we're going to talk about the clash or the war or the battle between Pakistan and India. We'll be getting a sense of what really transpired between these two countries. But Ejaz Saab, first of all, who lost it? Who won?
Thank you, Faisal. Victory and defeat in most cases are subjective categories. Professionals don't really get into that because one of the things that war or conflict defies is clarity. So leaderships, whether political leaderships or military leaderships, are often drawn into wars or conflicts by this, what military historian Castle Nolan calls the allure of battle.
Hmm.
This getting to a decisive battle to win decisively. But frankly, if you look at military history, it's the single hardest thing to do. And by that, what I mean is to translate combat or multiple combats into achieving an important strategic and political goal. And what do I mean by achieving an important strategic and political goal? It's not a unilateral thing. The other side, so you've got two adversaries,
Yeah.
and one of the adversaries actually gets the other side through combat or through multiple combats to recognize and accept the strategic and political goal of the state that has actually won. That you can call winning. And I can give you an example of that. You look at Japan, you look at Germany after First World War. There was an armistice. There were reparations. There were a number of other conditions that the Germans had to fulfill. But the alliance against Germany ultimately could not really get Germany to accept that it cannot expand, that it cannot project power. So within a matter of 20 years, Germany had rearmed, its industry had become huge. It had a military that was excellent in terms of, operational strategy. And then, of course, a number of other issues hadn't been resolved.
Hmm.
So what do we get? We get into the second big war. But after the second big war, the, the approach of the victors, in this case led by the United States,
Yeah.
was different. What they did instead was that they pulled Germany and Japan into their camp. They subsumed them. The US-led alliance's politico-strategic objectives also became the politico-strategic objectives of Japan and Germany. And, 80 years down the line, frankly, that situation still obtains. So World War I, there was no real victor. And I'm not talking about tactical victories. I'm talking about the broader strategic,
With the
victory and
grand
defeat.
strategic part of it.
Precisely. So what you often get, is something clouded, which is neither triumph nor defeat. And so you have what I would call an arena of gray outcomes.
Yeah.
You can have partial resolution of disputes and causes that led to the choice of force as an instrument of policy in the first place. But frankly, at the end of the day, uh, the issue is not resolved. So in the case of this, what I call equalizer 3.0 between India and Pakistan,
Hmm.
no one has won. and no one has lost, because it's not about bean counting. It's not about us downing 5 or 6 aircraft. It's not about India hitting multiple air bases in Pakistan.
Hmm.
The central point to understand is whether Pakistan has accepted India's political strategic objective and vice versa.
Uh,
And the answer is no.
and the answer is
And therefore, both of them have walked away from this, drawing different lessons. And therefore, the corollary is that we will have more violence. We are not getting into a stage of stability, if you
unless
will.
unless you sit down and resolve matters. That's exactly what Pakistan is saying. That from a mechanism where you manage crisis, you have to shift to crisis resolution. That's probably what Pakistan and India need to do. Does it qualify as a war? Whatever happened between Pakistan and India, Ejaz Saab, was it a war? Was it a battle? Escalation? How do we define this thing?
This is short of war, because neither side uh, basically brought into the conflict all of its capabilities. It was geographically confined. It was a series of short and sharp strikes, basically standoff strikes, with the possible exception of uh, the PF strike package that went in. But I don't think that they really went into the Indian airspace. But they came close to, I mean, this was a strike package that was sent in to take out one particular important component of the S-400
Yeah.
system, which has which has two radars and which has launchers and which has a C2 station. So yeah, I mean, but I won't call it war. It's I would call it a series of short and sharp standoff strikes on both sides.
Okay. So, from India's point of view, have they been able to achieve their political objectives? You were earlier referring to it, but what do you say? In yes, no, what is it?
No, no, they haven't.
They
You
have
see,
not.
whether you look at it in terms of deterring Pakistan or whether you look at it in terms of compelling Pakistan, in terms of India's political strategic. So let's look at what India's political strategic objective is or should
Okay.
be. This is leaving aside the fact that it has a right-wing extremist Hindutva government,
Yeah.
which also has a communal policy inside which it links up with Pakistan. But leaving that aside for a while, what could possibly be the political strategic objective? The political strategic objective of India is that it's a big country, it's the hub, and it's got the spokes outside. And therefore, the balance of power in the region has to be heavily in favor of India, which then translates into India's expectation to have Pakistan behave not as a countervailing force to India, but basically as an appendix, as a West Bangladesh, if you will. And I'm using this term West Bangladesh. It reminds me of the late Steve Cohen, who once at a seminar, and I'm talking about like nearly 25 years ago,
Okay.
uh, talking to me, said that India wants Pakistan as the West Bangladesh. And I remember chuckling and saying, that's not going to happen.
It is certainly it's not happening. The much hyped or the much talked about air battle, Ejaz Saab. What did India lose? Because we know that air superiority or air dominance has special significance when it comes to a war between two countries. Ejaz Saab.
Faisal, this is something I've written about. There was a lot of debate, and I was following the debate. There were, these video logs and, written analyses also. And people were talking about whether J-10C is better than Rafale,
Yeah.
whether what India had and what Pakistan had. What people seem to be, barring some exceptions,
Yeah.
missing the fact that It's not about J-10C versus Rafale or PL-15 versus the Meteor.
Meteor, yeah.
It's about the Pakistan Air Force creating a system, a kill chain, where different components work in synergy. And the synergy is essentially about the whole exceeding the sum of its parts.
Hmm.
And so you have the pilot, who is the human, wedded to the machine. It's a Catholic kind of marriage where during combat there can be no divorce, because if you divorce the man from the machine,
Yeah.
then the system falls apart. It's the aerial platforms talking to each other, the aerial platforms talking to ground stations, the ground stations talking to, and when I say aerial platforms, I'm not just talking about the strike package part of it, but also the early warning systems,
AVAX.
the jammers. The jammers, if you remember AVM Aurangzeb, when he made that presentation,
Yeah.
he played the clips of the communication between Rafale pilots. What does that indicate? It indicates that the counter air operation on the Pakistani side, everyone from the pilots up in the air to the DS-20, which was jamming, to the Saab early warning and control system, to the ground stations, as in from where this entire thing was being looked at and controlled. That was 360-degree situational awareness. They knew exactly what was happening.
Okay,
And
but this.
so this wasn't a dogfight, as initially people said. These were silent kills. This was an ambush.
Oh,
And frankly, if you recall what their chief of defense staff Anil Chauhan said to Bloomberg in this interview, for 2 days, it took them 2 days to figure out what had happened. And then he said that there were these tactical mistakes made that we then tried to overcome. And then they were airborne, frankly, but staying outside of the engagement envelope of Pakistan Air Force. They were airborne after 48 hours.
were they airborne after 48 hours because they moved their air assets something like 300 kilometers deep inside India to ignore to protect themselves against Pakistan aircrafts?
Yeah, so they realize that they have to stay outside the engagement envelope.
Yeah,
And then they decided to basically strike at the PF assets, because they realized that head to head in the air is not going to work. So they decided to degrade the capabilities of Pakistan Air Force
yeah,
by striking at the air bases, and they used the air-launched BrahMos supersonic cruise missile
yeah.
and also the Scalp EG missiles. And that is where what I mean, I won't exactly call it a capability gap, because it's extremely difficult to intercept cruise missiles because they don't have a consistent trajectory. And
Hmm.
also, given the speed of the BrahMos from the launch point to the point of impact, it's a matter of maybe what, like 40 seconds, 50 seconds. So it's extremely difficult to stop that. But they realized that this was a weapon system that they could employ
Employ.
with a degree of impunity, and they did that.
But these missile systems, they're not reliable because one, their mobility is compromised, and they can be attacked if you launch concentrated airstrikes. What I am intrigued about, Ejaz Saab, here is the fact that you talked about the kill chain. You talked about AVAX, EVI, and then the aircrafts linked with them, and then the radars. So, people are saying that there were Chinese satellites; those were also linked to it when it comes to creating a holistic or creating situational awareness regarding this conflict, regarding this battle.
Yeah, there's the constellation of early warning Chinese satellites. And I think this is where China's role
Yeah.
becomes significant. It's not about China. I remember when in the run-up, before the shooting actually started, I remember getting into a discussion and someone asked me if the Chinese would physically move some of their troops along the line of actual control. And I said, no, they won't. That's not how the Chinese operate.
Hmm.
China has, because there's a strategic fusion of sorts. We have been conducting exercises, joint exercises with the PLA Air Force. These have been SEED exercises, as in suppression of enemy air defenses. These have been DEED exercises, as in destruction of enemy air defenses. There have been other, this entire kill chain that has been created. Practicing that, you have to hardwire it. So there is this strategic fusion, and it's very smooth.
Hmm.
There are no jerks involved in this. So the Chinese are not helping us in terms of actually physically getting into this fight.
Okay.
They have helped us in terms of providing certain platforms which we have integrated through a data link which has been indigenously developed.
Oh,
Uh,
that
this, this,
sounds great. That you've developed capabilities which are indigenous to you, and people have been saying that you're using Chinese equipment and you're also having Chinese help. But we've worked with NATO as well. We've been a non-NATO ally,
no,
and I remember
but
I
Faisal,
yeah,
just a second. I mean, this
please,
this whole thing
yeah,
about you use Chinese equipment. I've heard this from the Indian analysts.
yeah.
Well, India is using Russian platforms. India is using French platforms.
There you
India
go.
has the Tejas, which frankly is, at the end of the day, when they started working on it, they said all of it would be indigenous. When it flew, the only indigenous part of the plane was the pilot in it. So, so all these platforms are essential. So we are making J-17s, Block 3s, and all that.
Yeah.
This whole thing is frankly a distraction in terms of they're using. I mean, and it's also not about the superiority, as I said, of one platform over another.
Yeah.
It's about how the Pakistan Air Force has evolved the skill chain, which is completely about Pakistan Air Force.
Yeah.
It's not about this system or that component.
I remember when this air battle took place, there were reports from international media outlets. The world is shocked. The defense industry is shocked, and they want to find out more about the skill chain that Pakistan has created. Ejaz Saab, I would have liked to talk about it more, but the time constraints are there. Last, but not the least, please briefly touch upon this issue. Will India attack Pakistan again? Is there a chance?
Of course, I mean, it's not inevitable, and I cannot give a timeline on this, but the fact that the central issues remain unresolved and the interests of one adversary and the interests of the other adversary
Yeah.
are they do not match. There is no common ground, and in some ways it has become what James Farron called issue indivisibilities, in the sense that there are issues where a compromise becomes harder and harder to find. And if you link it up with India's stated policy, a policy stated by their Prime Minister Narendra Modi after this clash,
Yeah.
that any quote unquote terrorist attack will automatically be pinned on Pakistan and will become a casus belli, a cause of war between India and Pakistan. And also the previous stated policy of not engaging Pakistan and doing or taking unilateral actions like the one that was taken with reference to occupied Kashmir. So unless and this is purely speculative, and I don't think it's going to happen unless the two sides can come together.
Yeah.
For instance, just quickly, if President Trump is really interested in, not just crisis management, not just crisis stability, but in resolving the issues, then he would probably have some kind of special envoy like Steve Witkoff or someone else
Yeah.
that gets Pakistan and India back on the table, right? Where you can restart the comprehensive dialogue, or call it the, whatever name that you want to give it, comprehensive, or there was this whole thing about pillars and the rest of it. So nomenclature is not important. A lot of work has already been done by the Sherpas. It's about political will on both sides.
Yeah.
But I don't see, under the circumstances, given the Hindutva politics for India or for Mr. Modi, to actually go in that direction. And so if he doesn't go into that direction, and the freedom fighters in Kashmir mount another attack, then by his own stated position, he will have to get into a conflict with Pakistan once again.
Thank you very much, Ejaz Saab, for your precious time. This is all from us. We'll come up with the new issue tomorrow. Thank you very much for being with us.